you can apply the word kshama there. But supposing the criminals who do things, such things, you can't be pardoned without punishment, is it?
Now, see, we are talking of our relationships. The value of kshama is basically to be followed in our relationship. If that criminal happens to be related to us, then we can have kshama towards that criminal. Although punishing the criminal is a social justice, that is not opposed to kshama. You can punish that person while being compassionate also. If you think that punishing that person will help the person, kshama is not the description of an act or a behavior. It is the attitude that you have in your mind. And it is possible. What is meant by compassion is that you have in your heart the well-being of that person. And thus to accomplish that well-being, it is maybe that you need to punish that person. So we are not saying that criminals are to be let go because they are a harm to the society or a threat to the society, so they must be restrained.
If I am a nasty, ill-behaved person, and if everyone around me is accommodating me and accepting me, wouldn't that encourage me to not change or do anything about it? I may feel this is normal.
See, now you are talking in a different way. We are talking about ourselves who accommodates a nasty person. What the nasty person should do is a different value. It is likely that the nasty person may think that it is my right and therefore I may take it for granted and then not change and even get more spoil. It's likely. But more likely it is that the nasty person recognizes that in spite of my nastiness, compassion is shown to me. And perhaps our compassionate behavior may invoke compassion in that person. A nasty person will not change by our being nasty to that person. So even if you want that person to change, the true change can only happen by compassion and not. Outwardly you may want to restrain that person and do what is necessary. If the person is harmful, you may want to restrain. But that is also not out of retaliation, ideally. It's difficult, but this is what we are slowly seeking to be. Yes.
Is it possible that to hurt other people out of compassion?
Say that again.
Is it possible to hurt other person out of compassion?
Force other person out of compassion. Hurt other person out of compassion. Out of compassion. It is not possible to hurt other person out of compassion. It is not possible to punish the other person out of compassion. However, it is possible to carry out a hurtful action for helping that person. That is possible. Meaning that if you are a surgeon, you may be a compassionate person and still you may cut off a part of the body which is inflicting pain upon the other person out of compassion for the well-being of that person. So you cannot hurt somebody out of compassion. You can perhaps cause pain to somebody out of compassion if that pain is going to help that person. Sometimes you may have to inflict pain. You give a slap for the person to realize what's happening. If a person is distracted, then you will bring him to the right path, and that may need restraining the person, or even, not hurting the person, but maybe physically also person is restrained or hurt. Possible. Because the intention and the compassion is to the well-being or happiness of the other person. And if in a given situation you feel that by restraining that person or by perhaps even punishing that person, that would help that person, you may do that. It's done not out of anger, but out of the desire for the well-being of that person. Yes.
Sometime as a mother or a parent, you have to discipline the child. And it's all out of love, all out of feeling of well-being. You want them to be a good person. But you find out later in life that some children keep those resentments that their growth was distorted or whatever because they were given that kind of punishment or discipline. How do you deal with that?
So question is that the parent does what he or she does out of the desire for disciplining the child. That is again the same thing. When you discipline somebody, that means you're restraining that person from not allowing that person to do what the person wants to do, restrain. That's called disciplining. And depends upon that child. If the child is not mature, then it may feel that my parent is punishing me, is being unfair to me, because it does not allow me to do what I want to do. If disciplining also is accompanied with communication as to why you are doing what you are doing, if it is possible, it may not be possible, if it is possible to make the child understand why this restraint is done, why the disciplining is done, what is the advantage that is there for the child, that would be good. But sometimes you don't have the opportunity to do that, sometimes there is not the occasion to do that, and you just discipline them, and child feels that I am being punished. So parent is disciplining, and child's interpretation is I am punished. Parent disciplining, child's interpretation is the parent is being unfair to me. So if this is the kind of interpretation that the child has, then it will harbor resentment. And every time the parent disciplines, a resentment arises in a child because the child concludes that it is unfair to me. So very likely that the parents' attempts of disciplining the children may create a resentment in children because they don't have the maturity to understand the value of what the parent is doing. They only know what they are not allowed to do, what they are deprived. So when you do not allow a child to eat third piece of candy, not allow the child to eat fifth slice of pizza, things like that, a child may feel that I am deprived of what I want to do, although it may be for the well-being of the child. But there is no maturity to understand that. So it keeps on going away the feeling of being deprived, being punished, unfairness. If this is what is a feeling that this creates in a child, it is likely that there would be a build-up of resentment and anger. Now another thing is, when we are disciplining a child, how are we doing that? Very often we also do it out of anger. Although we may give it the name of disciplining, but it is more punishment than disciplining. Because when we get angry and then when we do, it is then act of violence. So even though as far as the form of the action is concerned, it may be justified as discipline, as far as spirit of action is concerned, it is violence because it is done out of anger. And that's what reaches the other person, that this is anger. I think that the parent was firm and kind within the heart and carried out that act of discipline. Maybe that may reach the child. There will behind discipline also the parent means only well. Then the resentment may not rise. Because many children tell us, Swami, your grandfather was like this, and then we had to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. No choice. And then recite Gita, do all kinds. They didn't care like this. And go to the temple and do this. But then now they say it was so nice that our grandfather did this. At that time, because grandfather had love for the children, although there was strictness, discipline, but love was there, and there were children complied, And when they grew up, then they realized that what the grandfather did was for their good. Swami, I could not have recited this verse just now. This love for Gita is generated because this is what I was asked to do. So that act of disciplining, whether it comes from, where does it come from, is also important.
You can compare this amount of discipline to stretching a rubber band. Sometimes, in your point of view, if you are justifying yourself disciplining this and you keep on just disciplining, and finally this rubber band breaks. It's too much, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how about those doses should be given, of course with the compassion that you mean well, but not all at the same time.
There is always, the judgment required. So you have to be judiciously cruel. Parenting is a very tough job, very demanding job. I can only imagine what demanding it is. We have escaped from all those things as responsibilities. But it is a very demanding job. And therefore you have to be... And parents themselves are young generally when they have children, so they are not educated. We don't in India, I don't have any kind of workshops for parenting, etc. So we don't know. What we learned from our mother told something, and that's what we do. So there is not much understanding of the psychology of a child and what the child's real needs are and how to do things. So first child is an experiment, second child little more success, third child then you become a little wiser and then. The first child suffers the most.
One small question. Sometimes we love kids so much. Sense of fear comes that I hope they are all okay. My kids are all out of town. And then I miss them, then you just feel, hope everybody's okay. They come safe and sound. They drive next long way. So the fear comes in. Sometimes my son drives late night. Then sense of out of love.
So here is the question, that sometimes we love our children so much that we are always worried about them, about their well-being. What is happening? Is he driving all right? Why is he driving at night? And so it is not control, they are away actually. I mean, if they are with you, then also, why is it late? It's already 5 minutes and the time is, you should return from the school. So this can be called over-attachment, excessive attachment. So one of the values that Lord Krishna teaches in Bhagavad Gita is anabhishvangaha. Svanga means sangha, means attachment. Abhisanga, excessive attachment. Attachment is required in every relationship. Without attachment, things don't work. The Vedanta says give up attachment. You cannot give up attachment. As long as you are living life in the midst of other people, there is attachment, because then only there is a relationship. That's what binds people together. It's attachment that brings about the care and concern. But excessive attachment brings about this fear and insecurity. That means we don't give them the freedom. In a way, we are holding on to them and we're owning them up. So then that relation becomes a little ownership. I own up. I don't give them freedom. No, you can't go at night. I'm worried about you. So you are worried about it. That fellow has, a problem, because then you prevent them from doing a lot of things. No, I don't allow my children to go for camping. I don't allow them because I'm worried. So when that so-called attachment becomes over-attachment, then there is a sense of ownership, in which case I slowly suffocate. What happens is our love becomes suffocating love, that we don't give them the freedom. So the age 18 child wants to get out, not because it doesn't love the parent, but because it feels this is excessive attachment, too much of possessiveness. We have to watch out for that. It comes from our own insecurity, by the way, because we are seeking security from them. So whereas we think that we love them, we seek security in return, and that is why this ownership thing comes, which is excessive attachment.
Is it, Swamiji, our anxiety too? It's mind projecting or something, story after story, or the child is, isn't it?
Is it the anxiety? Is it projecting? It may become nature of a person to worry about things in general. Yeah. But that person will worry about a lot of other things also, not only about the child. Basically worry about one's own self, really. Because I am so connected to the child that when something happens to the child, corresponding happens to me. So even though I see what happens to child, in reality I am concerned about what will happen to me as a result of this happening to the child. So ultimately concern becomes concern for ourselves, and all this also in excessive attachment also. What will happen to me? Okay?
Swamiji, please sing Shivoham.
Okay, let us make these lights dim.